All right, again, hello everyone. My name is Tommy Moussis, and today we're going to be talking about using Autodesk Advanced Deal with an MIS solution or integrating with MIS solutions. So this is a broad topic just for the fact that, of course, if you have a MIS solution in-house, the integration is a little bit less complex in the sense that you can choose which file format is best suited to your case and manage things accordingly. But we're to approach this in with two different scenarios. For example, if you're a detailing firm sending information to a fabricator, or if maybe you're an actual fabricator but outsourcing the fabrication process for a particular project, or even a fabricator that is fabricating in-house. We're to cover all these topics and take a look at various different ways of sending information to a fabrication shop. So the webinar overview, it will encompass modifying DSTV formats through the management tools. So if you are familiar with Advanced Deal, of course, there's a lot of different setting adjustments that you can make to NC files and in general, DXF files, DSTV extraction. So we're to be taking a look at the various different options, how to set up default profiles as well for different fabrication shops if you are a drafting firm, managing the GTC mapping database. So there's various different formats that you can extract as well from your Advanced Deal model to send to an MIS solution. So the main format, this would be a KISS file. So keep it simple, steel. So we'll take a look at how we can extract a KISS file and make modifications if needed. So if you send something to a fabricator and they say, hey, this section or this type of profile isn't coming into my database, we would like the naming convention to be different or maybe adjust the general format, how can we go about this? We'll take a look at how we can manage that database. So once again, outputting NC files or NC1 files, how can you adjust the part marks, things of this type we will talk about as well. Understanding the NC block references. So just understanding the DSTV output, the NC format, which type of blocks, SI blocks, BO blocks, AK blocks, etc. What all these variables mean with the extraction, how to find errors prior to exporting the data. So of course, if you were to extract a member or output an NC file in reference to your member in Advanced Deal, there could be issues that come along. Maybe there's an error within the file, and we're to take a look at what could possibly cause these errors and just basically how to find them in your model afterwards, how to rectify it prior to sending the information. Creating filters for the Project Explorer. Excuse me. So creating filters for the Project Explorer. Sorry about that, just one moment. Needed some water. All right. So basically we're to talk about how we can build queries to facilitate extracting information. This is more towards extracting lists. So of course with fabricators, sometimes they don't want NC files. Maybe they just want a list for their own purchasing purposes. So you can create various filters and queries in Advanced Deal to facilitate the extraction of information for your fabricators. We'll be taking a look at that as well. And various ways of importing the data into Advanced Workshop. So Advanced Workshop is a Graitec solution. It's an MIS solution. Okay, so we'll be taking a look later on at the scenario of if you do have a fabrication shop and you're just wanting to send the information from Advanced Deal into the workshop for the fabrication process, how you can use an MIS solution to manage all aspects in terms of purchase orders, nesting, stock control, documentation control for CE markings and things of that type, etc. Now, managing the output. We just spoke about this, so this is what we're going to cover first. So managing the defaults for your DSTV extraction, managing the GTC mapping data set, understanding the DSTV format, and finding errors with the DSTV file prior exporting. here's just a few, or actually these tables represent the various blocks or things to understand with a DSV file. So here, for example, you have the part face, so the letters associated to the different part faces. Here you'll have the profile types and the description of those profiles, and here you have the block references. So the start of the file, end of the file, the whole, stamps, etc. We'll come back to this later on when we're taking a look at how to find specific errors with the output of an NC file. And again, the last part of the presentation will be how to manage all the information within an MIS solution. So all the information extracted from your advanced deal model, what do you do with it? How do you optimize the production, planning efficiency and profit, control workflow processes, machinery and decisions, and manage the time, documents, stock, and labor. Just so you know, in the next coming weeks, we do have many webinars coming up. So here are the upcoming webinars, and I'll show this slide at the end after our Q&A session. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. It'll be roughly 5 to 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and start off with what type of information would a fabricator want from your advanced steel model. So this is always depending on the situation, depending on the fabrication shop, and so on. First, let's talk about the common files. So NC, DXF, they probably want list extractions to be able to process the information as well. We'll talk about these in a bit. First, one that's very common is KISS file. Okay, so this will be able to import their information in the MRP system, excuse me. So MRP system or MIS solution, whatever they would have. Now, of course, in order for this to work, you would have to have your model numbered prior. So here I'm just going to double check and make sure my model is numbered. Here I'm going to keep the format simple. Just use a simple counter method. And here we'll go ahead and output the KISS file. Now here I'm going to use metric, and I'm going to save it at this location. So here there might be a few profiles that don't come in. We'll talk about that in a bit when we're taking a look at the GTC mapping database. So just to speed things up, and I'll go through all that mapping. Now, we've outputted the KISS file. Let's take a look at what type of information would be sent through this file format. So here we're going to go to this file. Here it might take a second to load. I went there a little bit quick. There we go. All right, and let's open it and take a look. Now here with this extraction, we'll see that it outputs the part mark, the section, the profile type, and it gives general section heights, okay, for the profile. Now here, of course, plates will be encompassed as well, and it's the information is minimalistic in the sense of it won't give you all the whole references and so on. This is just to manage more or less the stock control once you input it into an MRP or MIS system. Now, the common issues with exporting this type of file to a fabricator is the naming convention or the prefix associated within this format for a fabricator. They might already have predefined prefixes, for example, round bar. This is a common one. So round bar in their system might be just a capital R, maybe it might be RB, and so on. So they might request, hey, due to the fact that this is not populating, we don't want to populate all the entries manually. How can you adjust this so that we can receive the information seamlessly? Well, let's go over here to the GTC mapping database. So here we're to go into program data, Autodesk, and here we're to go into the advanced folder. So of course you have the advanced steel folder, but this particular database is going to be located under the advanced folder as well. And here we're to open up the GTC mapping Microsoft Access database. Of course, you do have this at another location. You can open it up in in the SQL database. I'll just go ahead and show that for a second. So here, if we go under steel, data, we will find it here as well. So you will find the MDF format. But just to make things simple, we'll open it up in the Access database. So within this database, you can modify other extractions, okay? So here you'll have a GTC material profile conversion tables that you can modify. You can modify also the material types, application. So here under application, you can have many different let's say companies involved. So if you have to extract KISS files for not only just one fabricator, but multiple fabricators request this from you, you can actually have multiple applications, if you will, to have different standards. So here we can see under the profile conversion table that will have the general application. And here we can go ahead, and if we populate this here, let's just go ahead, give it a name. And go back to the profile conversion. Here we'd have to reload or close and restart, but then it will appear here. Now here we'll see round bars with the KISS type output RB. So if you needed to modify this for your fabricator, you could just change the naming convention to map what they would particularly use to import into their system. Pretty simple and straightforward to manage that. Here you have the material conversion tables as well. So if material entries aren't seamless, you can go and map or change the output name. Okay. So let's close this and go back into Advanced Steel. So that's one format that's very commonly used. Let's take a look at just another one that's typical, of course, is sending a list. So here with the list, we can always modify the lists in Excel and sort and so on if they were need to take the Excel list and import it into their MRP or MIS system. Here, let's just take a look at converting a material list to Excel. So it's a very easy process. Those who already use Advanced Steel are very aware of this. So we're just going to show it quickly. Now, once the list is extracted, here you'll have an export feature, and you can export to Excel. So quite simple, easy to do, and if they need to adjust any information, because a lot of these systems do have Excel importing features, and here you can even see in Advanced Workshop, so this is the interface for Advanced Workshop, we do have options to import XLS. Okay, so here once you export, then after if they need to change anything with the naming conventions, they could just do them manually. So that's a common way to communicate the information. And then here, of course, we have the NC file and DXF file extraction tools. So just below that, we have the NC settings. Now, these are just the preliminary settings that you can modify. So here you can have the behavior for the numbering based off of the assembly numbers or the single part numbers, and here you can adjust the file name convention, the phase identification, things of this type. So you can use other tokens that are part of the properties, the advanced properties of your members. And then here you have your DXF settings that you can modify as well. So the colors associated to the different line type involved with the DXF file. Now, for those who are wondering, hey, if I need an NC1 file, what do I do? It's very simple. You could just add a 1 at the end of the extension. It's that easy. Now, first, let's take a look at the difference between outputting based off of your assembly numbers or based off of your single part numbers. And for this example, I'll just go ahead and utilize the plates. Actually, when manipulating the behavior for your NC settings, this will also have an effect on your DXF settings. And just so that this is a little bit more visual, we'll show the difference with the DXF output as opposed to the NC output. We'll get to this in a second. So first, I want to make sure that I don't have any DXFs extracted already, so I do not. I do have the NC files already extracted, but here we'll take a look at afterwards, deleting them and re-extracting. So to facilitate outputting the plates, here I can just go ahead and use the hidden icon for DXF plates. Now, this will only take a few seconds. Depending on, of course, the size of your model, it might take a little bit longer. And there we go, it's done. Now, here, keep in mind, we are basing it off the assembly number. So what effect does this have? If we take a look at the document manager, here we'll have the DXFs, and you'll notice that, here, let's go to the next one, preferably a base plate. All right, so it's not necessarily a base plate, but we do see an intersecting member, rectangular hollow section, and we see the main part reference scribed on this piece as well. So if you do not want any scribing of a main part mark or its signature block reference associated to the plate, then you'd probably want to output based off of the single part marks. Okay, so if we go here, we make this change, NC based off of single part numbers, and say OK. Here we're going to go back into the document manager. And we'll see here that updates are required already. So I did not have to extract the information again. Here I can just simply force an update. And here we'll see that it will not associate any information to the main part mark reference. Now, of course, there's always the question of, well, if I have an assembly, for example, a column assembly, you might still want to associate the main part mark reference with the main member or the main part of that assembly and not want to see the single part mark reference. So those who are familiar with advanced steel, of course, there's always going to be two numbers associated to your assembly. And one way of resolving this issue is actually with your numbering tool. Okay, so if you want to output based off of the single part marks but still want to see the main part number associated to the single part number, well, then what you can do is adjust your numbering method. You can use a post numbering method. Okay, so just so we see what that affects, here I'm going to go ahead and delete the DXF files. And we're to delete the DSTV files as well. Now, if we go here and we do not use a post numbering method, hit apply and OK. Of course, then you're to run into this issue of, here, I'll put a DXF for this section, even though it's not a common request. You wouldn't typically want a DXF of a profile. Now here, see, it's using M7. And okay, well, here that's the single part mark, and that's the main part prefix. However, here let's delete the numbers associated. So I might have just skipped over this step. Let's just do this and then renumber. Okay, there we go. That makes a little bit more sense. So now here we have M40 and C7. So the main part mark is C7, single part mark, M40. Now, if we output the DXF of this profile again, here, of course, we'll have M40. Now, why they wouldn't want this is because, of course, in the, to coordinate the fabrication in the shop, you'd want to still see the assembly mark reference tagged to one of the items. Maybe not all plates, but you would still want to see it on the main profile of the assembly with the jig in the shop is going to be based around. Jig might be a North American term. I hope it's not. But whatever they use the table to weld the other components together. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete that. And now see how we can rectify this, still using the output based off of the single part marks. Okay. But now using a post numbering method. So here you can use the post numbering method for single part marks based off of just standalone items. Typically, if you have this type of workflow or this request from a fabricator, you probably want to apply it to all assembly numbers. So here I'll click apply, okay. And of course here, once again, we need to delete the part marks. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. And renumber again. All right, great. Now all the numbers are reapplied. We'll go ahead and now put the DXF again. And here now we'll see the main part mark associated to the DXF, even though we have it based off of the single part numbers. All right, so managing other aspects. So these are the more simplistic or preliminary setting changes that you might want to make. Let's take a look at how much refinement you can really apply in Advanced Steel to the output of a DSTV file. So here, if we go over to the management tools, here you can control all the defaults for those who aren't familiar with Advanced Steel, all the defaults to Advanced Steel. And then here you'll have your profile. So here, just clicking on that pull down isn't enough. Here you could create new profiles and so on. So why would you want to create new profiles? Again, if you're a detailing firm and you need to send information to multiple fabricators, okay, you probably will need to create different profiles so that you can manage not only the NC output, but perhaps maybe the numbering output and various settings with revision control and so on. So here, let's take a look at some of these options. As you can see here under the structured BOM and NC, here we have the settings for your DSTV and NC and DXF output. You can see that there's a lot, okay? Attach pieces, contour plate, and in your NC here you can control with punch marks or a powder line. And here you'll, just hovering over these texts, of course you always see a little diagram indicating what type of block it's going to be in this case, so a PU or a KO block. For those who aren't sure what PU, KO blocks are, I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint for a second. Let's go back to this page. So if you're not familiar with these, of course you can look them up online and see what the various blocks coordinating with, excuse me. So here we can see a KO block is the mark and PU block is the powder. Now here you can have boring types for notches. So even with your whole configuration, you can control how the machine interacts with a cutout. There's a lot going on in here. Just know that, of course, when going through these settings and modifying things accordingly, you can always create new profiles and set new standards here to control your settings. Now, in some cases, it might not even be needed. Okay, there are MIS solutions out there that can manage the data regardless of the output. Well, I shouldn't say regardless of the output, but regardless of which software is being used to output DSTV files. For example, Advanced Workshop manages the information that gets received to standardize the NC or DSTV extractions. So here, I don't want to go into this just yet, but just so you know, we'll talk about this afterwards. Here you can manage and set up the standards for the actual machines that you have linked to Workshop in your shop. Okay, so next let's take a look at how we can find errors with the NC extraction. For this, I'm just going to open up a new file, and and essentially talk a little bit about what types of errors you can find and things to know about the objects and how it's extracting the NC files. So here, let's just go ahead and put in a W shape or an eye profile. Okay, and here we're going to go ahead and apply part marks. So why I needed to apply a part mark is, well, of course, to extract the NC files, you do need part marks applied, but it's also, you will only see the part or assembly coordinate system once you've numbered your item. So why this is important, because the assembly coordinate system doesn't only control aspects of your drawing output. So this has a heavy impact, of course, on creating detailed drawings in advanced steel. However, this also shows you the start reference of your item. So whenever you're looking at the various block references associated to your assembly components, note that the distance layout is going to be controlled from one side to another. So the coordinates are to be relative to this side in this case. Now I'm going to force an issue upon this member. So here we're going to go ahead and adjust the UCS against the member, and we're going to go ahead and apply some holes. Now, another thing to mention, these types of holes features are going to be mapped as IK blocks, so inner contours. So here we want to see them as BO blocks, which are in reference to holes. So I'll go ahead and use these sorts of holes here from the switch. Now, go ahead and make sure the snaps are on. And we're going to go ahead and extract this NC file. Now, if we go to the document manager, we'll see this here. And we see the BO blocks, we see the signature, and we do see the section types. Now, of course, with advanced steel, you're only able to see these in a script format, if you will. There are NC viewers or DSTV viewers out there. Here with Advanced Workshop, it does come with a DSTV viewer. So if you ever wanted to see the objects, here we do have a viewer. That's quite nice. So you can take a look at these objects in a physical representation as opposed to text. Now let's force an issue here. We'll go ahead and move this somewhere around here. So we do have holes in the web still and two holes floating out of space. Now it's easy to find this situation, but commonly when you're managing advanced steel and you're turning on and off items, let's say here I wanted to turn this item off for whatever reason, and then later on I turn it back on in my project. It's not easy to find this issue due to the fact that the feature needs to be showing in order to see a feature that's floating off of your beam. Let's go ahead. And here we're just going to force an update, and we'll see now that the extension puts in a .err, so meaning error. If we preview this, we'll see here the error related to the bolts, or the BO blocks, which are related to holes, I should say. So, of course, this is giving you an indication of what type of block reference is causing the issue, so then you can go back in your model and find it easily. Now, if we did have other features involved, sometimes, it can be a very complex assembly. There could be various holes here. So I'm just going to move this into position. Something like this. I'm going to force another update. So here, this type of hole, once again, I explained this earlier, but this would be an IK block. So here we can easily see that it's going to be in reference to one of the holes. Now, an easy way to find it, you can just go here to the Quick Views tab and then change the representation type so that you can see the features involved. If you want to see both features and the actual physical whole, just note that you can change it to this display type, which will be exact with feature edge. Then you'll be able to see the whole and the feature floating out in space there. So this isn't the only reason why this can cause an error. Of course, there can be issues with the part marks related to the items. It's always important to keep the numbering up to date with your project. But right, these are how you can resolve these issues, is understanding the block references and knowing that the 2 stars associated with the element, it's identifying that that's the issue or is causing an issue. Now, we also mentioned that we would want to build filters or queries with the Explorer. Now, why you'd want to do this is just to facilitate extraction of any sort of list that you're sending to a fabricator. For example, if you're outsourcing just the plates, you don't have a plasma machine in-house, and for the beams, depending on the sizes of projects you take on, of course, maybe those are just being burned manually in terms of copes and holes associated to the linear items. So then maybe you want to build filters. Here, I'm just going to give an example of creating a new query. So here, first I'm going to create a new folder. And then here we're going to go ahead and create a new query. Now, to create new queries, it's quite simple and easy to do. Here, you're to most that know advanced deal. Right now, what I'm using is the search filter tool. So whenever creating a query, it brings up the search filter tool. And we want to search based off the complete model. In this case, you can adjust the preliminary settings for the search. And then here, we could search based off a type of object. So here, we're to search based off the plates. And I don't need to really search for any other common properties. Let's say we're just outsourcing all the plates in this case. Well, that would be adequate. So I'm going to save this. That's plates. Say, okay, now we can use the queries to really facilitate maybe isolating only those objects to select and output a specific type of template list. So of course we do have a list already saved to extract only the plates with your project, but maybe you want a specific format like a material list, and then you can control it in this fashion. You can base it off a selection. You can also control the preliminary settings and filters within these lists. We'll take a look at that very quickly. So here, if we go to the BOM editor, you might have noticed that it outputted flats and so on, but that could be the material list itself and how it's formatted. So here, take a look at a structured list. We right-click and we go to the report content. Of course, you can control which objects are related. So you can control it with queries, you can control it with the template itself, and the proper way of extracting based off of a query in the first place isn't by selection like I've just done. The proper method of application would be to create a list through the BOM extract tool. So here, we can filter out based off the complete model. In this case, what I'm going to do is just create a new one. We can have it just be named plate. And then here, we'll start off with model objects as its filter. Now here I want to base it off the complete model. And as you can see here, I can just use the predefined query. Now, there's a lot of predefined queries here. So here we would just use plates, hit apply, next, and then you can select the preferred list type to extract that information. So there's a lot of different ways you can manage the output from Advanced Steel to link or to send this information to a fabricator or an MIS solution. Now let's take a look at if you did have an MIS solution in-house, what you would do with this information afterwards. So once you receive the data, how would you run your nesting, your purchase orders, coordinate the members to specific departments in your workshop, paint or various machines, and we'll just take a look at what's the true purpose. Why would you use this? Now, I'm going to open up here. We'll close the viewer. I'm going to open up Advanced Workshop, and we'll take a look at how we can import the information. So with Advanced Steel in particular, there's a very nice workflow for importing the information. We can actually import a GTCX or an SMLX file. So GTCX is the Graitec native BIM file format, and SMLX is Autodesk's file format for BIM communication, works with many different products in their portfolio. So let's take a look at exporting in this fashion. So as you can see, this is a BIM transfer. So one thing to mention is that your NC files should already be created and associated to the project. So I want to make sure that I create those first. Let's make sure the numbering is up to date. And here I'm going to go ahead and output the NC files. All right, so here it's telling me there's a specific error issue with that file. We'll just ignore it for now, just because we're limited on time. But here we can see all the NC files extracted. Now, I'm going to go into Advanced Workshop, and here we're going to actually import with the GTCX or SMLX file. So here, one thing we'd want to do first, of course, actually export. So here I'm going to save it at this location. Save it as a different file name. Now here we can go ahead and find the specific file. So here we have the demo ASUK final format, but we just extracted a new one called webinar. We're to use this here, and we can process the SMLX. Okay, so what it's doing now is, of course, associating all the data with what we call XCAM files. So this is Advanced Workshop's a file format. So it takes all the information through this SMLX and links it to the CAM files or profile. It's basically its own method of converting into its own intelligent file format, so you can associate more data with that particular type of object. Now here you might notice some objects are highlighted in yellow. This is indicating that Advanced Workshop has found some sort of issue with this object, or that does not fit its standard with its own output or DSTV format, and it's flagging and prompting you to update it. Okay, so this, all you have to do is essentially accept the changes. So here we can select all, and then here create the list. And we can also put some preliminary information here. We could change naming conventions. We can associate it to groups or other orders as well. So, and here you can create the NC files if they are not already created with the SMLX file. So we're going to create the list. Say OK, and then it's going to process us or prompt us to create a new order once that's done. So here it's going to tell you if any issues have occurred with converting objects into the XCAM files. Just click OK, and now it's going to prompt us to create a new order. So here I'm going to go ahead and change the description. We'll call this Graitec Advanced Workshop. Here we can specify the date and click OK. So now it's going to tell us if there were any issues importing the information. Now we'll see this here. So that's one method of importing the data, but maybe you don't have Advanced Steel. Or another scenario would be, what if you're a very large fabricator and you do projects for other workshops or detailers, etc. So how can you import the data without using the SMLX? Let's take a look at that. Now here I'm going to delete this order, and we're going to repeat the process by just using the NC files. Okay, so we can see that that the order is deleted. Now I'm going to import to DSTV. So here I'm going to go and find those DSTV files that we just extracted. So here we'll see what that file that we have all those NC files created. And now it's a very similar process. So what it's doing now is it's, of course, importing all the data. And here it might flag certain objects that needs to be revised, and I'll explain why it's looking at these as they do need to be revised. Because again, it already has it set up for its DSTV output to link to machinery. Okay, so if anything does not fit advanced workshop standards when you're importing the data, it'll just convert it, rectify it, so that you don't have to, communicate back and forth with the other detailing firm or workshop. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and select all these objects. Here you do have other functions as well. For example, if you have flats that are imported, let's say in advanced steel you have a railing system and the plates towards the bottom that are linking to your your railing system to a beam. Maybe the plates towards the bottom you can have them be cut as flat bar, or maybe you want to cut them from a sheet of plate or a plate sheet, etc. Here you can actually set selected records as plates as opposed to flats. So there's various different settings of that type. Now here I'm going to import. And here once again it'll show us that there were no issues with importing the information into Advanced Workshop. Now what we have to do once we import the data is convert it into an XCAM list. Okay, so it's an extra step, it's an additional step, but it's importing all the DSTV files, and now you have to convert the DSTV files into an Advanced Workshop's intelligent format. So here, we'll just keep it simple. We'll select all. Import them, and now we have the XCAM list. Okay, so here, just so you know, the XCAM list, you have to search and find. Okay, so here if we go to the demo file, all you have to do is select the folder for the NC extraction, and then it will convert. All right, so now let's go ahead. We can close this, and we can create a new order. So now here the order, I'm going to call it, once again, Graitec Advanced Workshop. Here I'm just going to specify the date. That's good enough. And here we're going to import the list. So this is where we go and find the list here that we just created, and we'll click OK. And there we go, all the information is imported. So you might be wondering why these two other folders up top, maybe these two other job orders, why they're green and this one is in red. It's because we haven't validated our processes yet. So now that we've converted into the XCAM files, it wants us to distribute the information throughout the workshop. Okay, so based off of a section size, if it's a plate or not, things of this type, you can manage all the data and sync it to the different departments in your workshop. So that's through the workshop manager. Before talking about this, let's take a look at all the data now associated to the work order. So here we'll see the assembly, we'll see the part associated. So this probably is a standalone object. And then here you'll see with this object, you can see the properties, the documents associated for CE marking when receiving them from a vendor. You can see, of course, the quantity, the section type, and the work centers. Now, we haven't validated our process yet. Therefore, there is no information to see here. What else can we adjust? Now, here, if I go to Right-clicking, we can edit the order and we can edit parts. So if we go through here, edit order, it actually triggers the same function, but we're to go through this here just to take a look at how we can edit the orders. So here I'm going to load from the order. So Graitec Advanced Workshop, we're to select this here, say OK. Now, first of all, why would you want to edit an order? Well, let's say we're already in the stage of fabrication and we realize, okay, there needs to be a few other bolts or bolts ordered, or perhaps another plate needs to be fabricated. Well, you can actually do it directly in Workshop as opposed to adding it to the Advanced Steel model. Of course, it's always best to just revise the project model and then trickle the data down, but sometimes you're bottlenecked, you don't have enough time for that, so you might want to create it directly in Workshop. So here, you can click on New, or we should click on Parts first, and then we can click on New, and then we can select if it's going to be a plate, a bolt, a screw, and then we can actually make changes to these objects. We can modify them. So let's just go ahead and click on one and see what types of modifications we can make. So if I want to take a look at fast utilities, here we can modify assembly treatments, we can modify the material type, prefixes associated, and so on. Here, if we double click on the item, then here you can change it from this location as well. Okay, so these are some of the changes that you can make to your order just by utilizing this interface. But what if we wanted to edit the Excel list? So what does this mean? Well, you can actually edit the object in terms of its geometry. You can reapply holes. You can change things like moving the SI block, the signature reference. So here under batch operations, let's say we want to add additional information to the actual call out of the item. Well, you can change the header. So here, if you want to change the order or change any treatments or add additional notes, this is all possible within this interface. And then afterwards, you can link these with barcode systems and things of that type. Okay, I don't want to get too detailed with that, but here you can also edit, insert new holes, delete items, move things around. Here you can add in miter cuts. And then here, if you want, you can create a whole new object. Now, what if you wanted to see a drawing of one of these items? Well, you can do that just from the tree as well. So here, if I right-click, we can edit the part from this tree as well. We can view the drawing. So if we wanted to view the drawings, Advanced Workshop also creates new details. So if, for example, in Advanced Steel, you wanted to output just your assembly drawings, but you had a similar solution like Advanced Workshop, some of these systems will also create additional details. So this will create all these single part or standalone drawings for these items. And of course, if you just wanted to view the item in a 3D view, it's a solid shape. Well, here you can load from work centers or the orders and view the objects. Okay, so these are just some preliminary things you can do within Workshop once importing the data or managing the preliminary data. Now, the next step would be to, of course, associate all the different objects with the different departments in your workshop. So paint department, or maybe you have 3-4 different machines, and you want Advanced Workshop to manage which items should go to which machines or which should be outsourced if, for example, it's a profile type that's much too large to handle in-house. Maybe you'll have another fabricator handle just that specific item. So let's take a look at that. So here we have the Workshop Manager. Here it's just loading for a second. Shouldn't take too long. And here we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try and rush through as much as I can here before the webinar is done, and give a little bit of time as well to answer questions. Still loading. It shouldn't take too much longer. I probably have too many things open at the same time. There we go. Okay. So let's go over to the workshop manager and see how we can control the items, how we can distribute them. So of course, first there's the processes themselves. So when linking defining your machines and their and which items should go to which machines, of course you have to link processes to the different machines. Okay, so and you might not want to do it just for that. Maybe you like to do it for the estimation side of things. Of course, we don't have time in this session to talk about that. But here you'll have all your descriptions of your processes, and of course you can create new ones and associate different codes to them. And then here you have your work centers. So the names of your work centers. Here I just have machinery. So here we'll see FISEP, Pettinghouse, Vortman, etc. And of course, you can actually modify the CNC output for each machine. Okay, so just to talk about that a little bit, because we want to understand how Workshop is flagging which any sort of errors with the import of NC files. So here we can go to the setup. I just want to show this. I showed it a little bit earlier, but we'll take a look at it again. So, for example, here we can control many different aspects for nesting, for bolt conversion, from if it's going to be a BO block or an IK block, the general setup here, DSTV plus, NC file. Okay, we can also control other settings with the bars. So what's the initial cut, the saw blade thickness, etc. With this particular machine, you could modify many different aspects here. Now, again, we have our work centers, and now we have the CNC drivers associated, and we have to put a specific code, of course, to reference later on when we sort our processes. And then here we have our work centers themselves. Now, which work center is going to handle which type of process? This is where you link the two together. And then here we have our workflows. Now, the workflows are defined here as restrictions for the machinery. So here, for example, if we have angles, in terms of profile size, a maximum of 100 millimeters in both directions for an angle. And here we have DA2. This is just indicating that the maximum hole size that this machine can handle is, or the maximum different diameter types it can handle are 2. And then here we have another process for another machine, angles maximum in terms of parameters and size, 508 millimeters, and there is no limit to the amount of diameters this can handle. So I'm basically applying the restrictions based off of the machines that I have in my shop. And now here, I can associate the filters and restrictions to which machine will handle this type of item. Okay, so here we'll see the FISEP will be able to handle, or that particular model that I have will be able to handle this particular restriction. However, if the angles get to a greater size, I can control to have it managed by another machine. Also, if, for example, you have 2 machines that are the same type in a house, you can have 2 A's associated to both machines. So then Advanced Workshop will distribute the amount of profiles that of that type to both machines and divide it equally. Okay, let's close this. Oh, I have to press there, escape. And then here we have our process definitions. So once we get to this portion here, we can filter based off a part, phase, or assembly. And then here we can search the different restrictions. So for example, beams, here I have my maximum in both profile length and height. And then here we can see that it's going to be managed by this particular workflow, okay? And we know that this workflow, or we probably looked at that a little bit quickly, but that workflow is associated with the Pettinghouse machine. So if it can't handle this item, then it's going to be external, it's going to be outsourced. Okay, and then here, of course, you can choose which types of profiles will be linked to that particular process. The initial setup takes a little bit of thought, of course, but once it's defined, you will never have to define it again. All you have to do is, once loading the order, you will run your process validation. So we're running a little bit short on time here. I'll just go through the process of creating a purchase order. That's basically all the time we'll have for today, but then we'll have a Q&A session for 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so this validation is almost done. All right, there we go. Now here we'll see it's yellow, so we still have to run our workflow validation. So the process validation goes through, of course, all the processes. If there's various holes or cuts that can't be handled with the association to the work centers. Okay, so it's seeing if everything is valid in terms of process related to the items. And then here we're to run our workflow validation. So now we're going to identify which members will be linked to which machines in shop and what will be outsourced, essentially. Okay. So now here, we'll see this in green, so we can actually go here to our production manager now and view all these items in the work centers. So here first I'll open up the work center. Through this interface, what you can do essentially is create work programs and send the work programs to the machine. So that's the end process. And then here we have manual nesting or automated nesting. And why you would want to do these, of course, you want to nest in reference to what you have in stock, or you want to figure out what you do have in stock and what you need to purchase in the upfront. So we'll take a look at filtering the orders, the description of the items. So here I'm going to minimize these orders, and we'll take a look at these items over here. So, okay, so these items over here, let's take a look at ordering these. Now, first one I want to do is take a look at the stock manager and see if we already have them in stock. So I can see for that particular item, we do have remnants from a previous project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is close this here, and we already have the document that came with the purchase order associated. So I can just go ahead and nest according to the remnants that I have, and then run the or send the information to the machine. Okay, so let's go here. We're going to automate the nesting. So now it's going to take us to this information, dialog, where we can find the different machines associated. And here we just selected those items, so that's all that's appearing. Here we can load from Advanced Workshop from the stock, or we can load from an Excel list as well. If you have another MRP system in-house that manages the stock, you do that. Preferably you want to have everything managed here. So, and next step would be to optimize. Now here we can see being optimized. We can create the bars in the database. We'll click OK. Now here we can close this, and once again we'll filter here and see that I'm going to minimize the other orders. Now these here, the quantities are adjusted. So next step, what we can do is actually create a work order and then send it to another folder. Perhaps you have a specific drive linked to this process, so then you can output the information to that specific drive and create the file. But that's essentially some of the steps of what you would do to manage the work in workshop. So here we just ran through the process of nesting against stock that was already in the shop. Here we can run the work process manager. So here we can see the work in progress. Of course, here we've just outputted a few bars here and send them to a work center, or I canceled that last application. So here we will see 0 because I canceled it. But here we can see with the other projects where we are in terms of work in progress. Here, if you'd like, you can view the view planner, CSC time charts. Of course, I'm not actually linked to any machine, so I can't show those aspects. But here you can also take a look at the various reports. If needed, you can output barcodes and then scan the bars when you're removing items from stock and so on. Here you can output many different types of lists. So here, if we take a look at, let's say, outputting a cutting list, or let's just output a basic bar list or part list. Of course, all these lists can be modified, and there's really no limit to what we can do with these sorts of lists. So we have our part lists. Here, if you need barcodes, so here we'll go ahead and I'll put the barcodes for all the items. So those are just a few examples of the list extraction tools, and unfortunately we're out of time for today. However, do you have any questions? Let's just go ahead and I can see your screen but cannot hear you. Well, I hope that wasn't for the full webinar. It's probably at the very beginning, I imagine. Does anyone have any questions at all? All right, well, there are no questions. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining the session, and if you would like to see the upcoming webinars, they're listed here. Oh, let's go back, made a mistake there. And if you do have any questions in regards to extracting information from Advanced Deal to import into an MIS solution or perhaps Advanced Workshop, of course, you can always email us your questions. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining the session, and have a good day.